The restaurant glowed softly against the dark evening street, its warm lights spilling onto the sidewalk like an invitation. Inside, the clink of cutlery mixed with low laughter, the smell of fresh bread and roasted garlic hanging in the air. Ethan paused at the door, one hand resting gently on his son's shoulder. Liam, 8 years old, looked up at him with that familiar mix of excitement and trust. "Just us tonight?" Liam asked quietly. Ethan nodded, forcing a smile that carried more weight than it showed. "Just us." For a moment, as they stepped inside, it felt like the world slowed down, like this simple dinner could almost erase the long days. The empty house, the quiet ache of being a single father trying to do enough. Before we go any further, tell me, where are you watching this from right now? Somewhere busy or somewhere quiet like this little restaurant? Drop your city in the comments. It's incredible how one story can travel farther than we ever expect. They were seated near the window, a small table meant for two. Outside, cars passed, their headlights streaking across the glass. Inside, Ethan helped Liam onto his chair, straightening the boy's hoodie without thinking. It was a habit one he picked up after his wife passed, when every small task became a reminder that it was all on him now. Liam studied the menu seriously, lips moving as he sounded out the longer words. Ethan watched him, heart tightening and softening at the same time. He worked long hours, skipped meals, ignored his own exhaustion, but moments like this made it worth it. That's when he noticed her. She sat 3 tables away. A young woman, maybe early 30s, with tired eyes and a child asleep against her chest. The baby's small hand clutched her sweater like it was the only safe thing in the world. An untouched glass of water sat in front of her. No food, no menu. Ethan didn't mean to stare, but something about the way she kept glancing toward the kitchen, then down at her child, pulled at him. There was a quiet desperation there, one he recognized too well. "Dad," Liam whispered. "Are you okay?" Ethan blinked, pulling his eyes back to the table. Yeah, buddy. Just thinking." Their food arrived quickly. Pasta for Liam, a simple chicken dish for Ethan. Liam dug in happily, sauce on his chin, completely unaware of the silent storm brewing in his father's chest. Ethan tried to eat, but every bite felt heavy. His gaze drifted back to the woman. She shifted in her seat, rocking slightly, soothing the baby without sound. When a server passed, the woman opened her mouth like she wanted to ask something, then closed it again. Ethan's hands tightened around his fork. He remembered nights when Liam was smaller, when bills piled up, and the fridge was almost empty. He remembered standing in line, pretending not to be ashamed. Remembered wishing just once that someone would notice. Without fully deciding, Ethan stood. "I'll be right back," he told Liam. "Don't eat all the bread without me." Liam grinned. No promises. Ethan walked toward the counter, heart pounding like he was about to do something reckless. The server looked up. "Can I help you, sir?" Ethan glanced once more at the woman. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'd like to pay for that table over there. Whatever she wants." And he hesitated. An autumn meal for her to go. Something warm. The server's expression softened. "Of course." Ethan paid quickly before doubt could catch up. As he turned back, the woman looked up, confused, eyes widening when the server spoke to her. She shook her head at first, clearly refusing. Then the server pointed gently toward Ethan. Their eyes met. For a split second, the woman looked like she might cry. She pressed her lips together, nodding slowly, gratitude and disbelief crossing her face at once. Ethan didn't wait for thanks. He returned to his seat, sitting down just as Liam looked up at him. "Dad, why did that lady look at you like that?" Ethan swallowed. "Sometimes," he said softly, "people just need a little help." Liam nodded, as if that answer made perfect sense. If you were sitting there and saw what Ethan saw, what would you have done? Be honest, drop your answer in the comments. And if this small moment touched something in you, tap like to show that kindness still has a place in this world. Across the room, the woman finally received her plate. She stared at it for a long moment before taking her first bite, tears slipping down silently. Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and unease. He had no idea that this simple act, this quiet decision made over dinner, was about to pull open a door to a story far deeper than he ever imagined. Ethan tried to focus on Liam again, but the room felt different now. Sounds were sharper, the scrape of chairs, the low hum of conversation, the baby's faint breathing from across the room. The woman ate slowly, like she was afraid the food might disappear if she moved too fast. When she finally stood to leave, she hesitated near Ethan's table. I don't want to interrupt, she said softly. Her voice trembled, thin but steady. Thank you. Ethan stood instinctively, shaking his head. You don't need to thank me. She adjusted the baby on her shoulder. You don't understand. Today was... She stopped, swallowing hard. Today was really hard. Liam looked up at her, eyes wide and kind. Hi, he said. Your baby's sleeping. The woman smiled for the first time, a small crack of light in her tired face. Yeah, she finally is. I'm Liam, he added proudly. I'm Grace, she said. And this little one is Ava. Ethan nodded. I'm Ethan. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Grace stepped back like she realized she'd stayed too long. I won't forget this, she said quietly. And then she left, the door closing behind her with a soft chime. The rest of the meal passed gently. Liam talked about school, about a drawing he was proud of. Ethan listened, answering when needed, but his mind kept drifting back to Grace's eyes. There was something familiar there, something unfinished. That night, after Liam fell asleep, clutching his favorite blanket, Ethan stood in the doorway longer than usual. The boy's chest rose and fell evenly, safe for now. Ethan turned off the light and walked into the quiet living room. Where the silence pressed him like a weight, he sat on the couch, rubbing his face with both hands. Helping Grace had felt right, necessary, but it also stirred something old inside him, memories he rarely let surface. Years ago, he'd been the one standing in a grocery store, counting coins while Liam cried in his arms. His wife, Lily, had still been alive then, but sick. Hospital bills had drained them faster than he could work. Nights blurred into mornings. Hope became something fragile. He remembered Lily's voice from those days. You're doing enough, Ethan, she'd whisper, even when it clearly wasn't true. The next morning, Ethan woke early and packed Liam's lunch. As he zipped the bag, a folded paper slipped out one of Liam's drawings. Stick figures holding hands under a big yellow sun. 3 figures, not 2. Ethan's throat tightened at school drop-off. As Liam ran ahead, Ethan heard someone call his name. Ethan. He turned. It was Grace. She stood by the gate, Ava bundled close against her chest. In daylight, she looked even more exhausted. But there was determination in her posture now. I wasn't sure it was you, she said. But I hoped. Ethan blinked. Hi, I needed to return something. She held out a small envelope. I didn't want your help to feel like charity. Ethan shook his head gently, not taking it. It wasn't. Grace sighed. I lost my job last week, she said suddenly, like ripping off a bandage. The daycare shut down without notice. Ava's father left before she was born. I've been trying to hold it together, but yesterday I just couldn't. Ethan felt the familiar pull in his chest, the same one from years ago. You don't owe me anything, he said. Grace's eyes filled. That's the problem. I don't know how to accept help without feeling small. Ethan hesitated, then spoke quietly. When my wife was sick, I felt invisible. Like asking for help meant I'd failed. He paused. But it didn't. It just meant I was human. Grace looked at him differently, now not as a stranger, but as someone who understood. They stood there for a moment, parents on either side rushing past, the world moving fast around them. "Would you like some coffee?" Ethan asked carefully. "There's a place nearby." No pressure. Grace nodded slowly. "I'd like that." They sat across from each other in the small cafe, Ava sleeping again between them. Grace spoke about late nights, about fear, about pretending to be strong when she felt like she was breaking. Ethan listened, really listened, and somewhere between the quiet sips of coffee and the soft hum of the espresso machine, something shifted. Have you ever had someone step in for you when you felt completely alone? If yes, type yes and share their name in the comments. Sometimes gratitude needs to be spoken out loud to keep its power alive. Ethan didn't know it yet. But this conversation, this unexpected meeting, was only the beginning. Because the pain Grace carried and the loss Ethan had buried were about to collide in a way neither of them could have prepared for. The cafe emptied slowly as the morning stretched on. Sunlight crept across the tiled floor, warming the legs of the chairs, catching dust in the air. Ava stirred once, made a soft sound, then settled again against Grace's chest. Grace rocked gently without thinking, her eyes distant now, like she was watching her own life from far away. "I used to have plans," she said quietly. "Normal ones. Career. A little apartment with plants I probably would have killed." She smiled faintly. Then everything narrowed down to just surviving. Ethan nodded. He knew that narrowing. The way dreams shrink until all that matters is getting through the day without breaking. After that morning, their paths crossed again and then again. Sometimes by accident, sometimes by quiet agreement. A shared bench outside the school while waiting for pickup. A quick coffee after drop-off. Grace never asked for help. Ethan never pushed. But presence itself became something solid between them. Liam liked Grace instantly. He waved whenever he saw her, asked about Ava. Once tried to make her laugh by pulling a face so ridiculous, Grace snorted before she could stop herself. It felt good to laugh without guilt. Weeks passed. Autumn crept in, painting the streets with fallen leaves and long shadows. One evening, Grace didn't show up at pickup. Ethan waited longer than usual. Parents thinned out. The gate closed. Still no Grace. Just as worry tightened his chest. He saw her running toward the school, hair loose, Ava crying hard in her arms. "I'm sorry," she gasped. The bus broke down. "My phone died." "You're okay," Ethan said quickly. "You made it." Grace nodded, but her hand shook as she adjusted Ava's blanket. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this," she whispered. "Everything feels like it's slipping." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay staring at the ceiling, Lily's old lamp casting soft light across the room. He thought about how close Grace was to the edge and how close he'd once been too. The next day, he made a decision. He mentioned a job opening at his workplace. Nothing fancy. Administrative support. Flexible hours. "It's not a promise," he told her carefully. "Just an option." Grace hesitated. Pride flickered across her face, then exhaustion won. "I'll try," she said, watching her walk into that interview a week later. Shoulders squared despite the fear in her eyes. Ethan felt something unfamiliar rise in him. Hope. No. Let me pause here for a second. Think about your own life. What's one small good thing you've done for someone recently, even if no one noticed? Share it in the comments. Your moment might remind someone else that kindness doesn't have to be loud to be real. Grace got the job. It wasn't a miracle. It didn't fix everything. But it was a start. She cried in the parking lot afterward. Ava strapped into her car seat, sunlight flashing across the windshield. Ethan stood awkwardly beside her, unsure what to do. Finally, she leaned forward and hugged him, quick, grateful, trembling. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me." Life began to rearrange itself in small ways. Grace found a tiny apartment closer to work. Ethan helped carry boxes up narrow stairs. Liam sat on the floor coloring while Ava crawled nearby, fascinated by the sound of crayons scraping paper. Sometimes, late in the evening, Grace would sit alone on her couch after Ava slept, staring at the quiet room. Stability felt unreal, like something that could vanish if she breathed wrong. Ethan felt it too. Every time laughter filled his apartment again, a part of him braced for loss. One night, as rain tapped against the windows, Grace stayed longer than planned. Liam was asleep in the next room. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, mugs cooling between their hands. "There's something I haven't told you," Grace said suddenly. Ethan looked up. "You don't have to, I want to." She took a breath. "The day you helped me at the restaurant, it wasn't just about food. I just come from the hospital." His heart stilled. "Ava was born early," Grace continued. "She still has complications. Every doctor visit feels like a countdown." Her voice cracked. "I don't know how much time I have before something goes wrong again." The words settled heavily between them. Ethan thought of Lily, of hospital corridors, of beeping machines and prayers whispered into the dark. Grace wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "No," Ethan said softly. "I'm glad you told me." Outside, thunder rolled low and distant. Inside, two people sat with truths too heavy to hold alone. Neither of them realized that the past they were tiptoeing around, the secrets, the grief, the choices they'd made to survive, were already moving closer, lining up for a reveal that would change everything they thought they knew. The rain kept falling long after Grace left that night. Ethan stayed at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug he'd forgotten to drink from. The apartment felt fuller than it had in years and heavier. Ava's fragile beginnings, Grace's quiet fear, the way those hospital words still echoed in his bones. He didn't sleep much. The following weeks moved forward, but with a new tension under everything. Grace smiled more now, laughed easier, yet there were moments when she drifted, eyes fixed on nothing. Fingers tightening around Ava, like she was afraid the child might fade if she loosened her grip. One afternoon, Ethan offered to drive them to a doctor's appointment. Grace hesitated, then nodded. The hospital smelled the same as it always had, clean, sharp, unforgiving. As they walked through the automatic doors, Ethan felt his chest tighten. Memories surged uninvited. Lily in a wheelchair, pale but smiling. Liam asleep on his shoulder during long waits. The way hope and dread lived side by side in those halls. Grace noticed his silence. "You okay?" "Yeah," he said, "just familiar." They sat together in the waiting room. Ava slept in her carrier, blissfully unaware. A nurse called Grace's name. Ethan stood, then stopped. "Wait here," Grace said gently. "I'll be quick." Ethan watched her disappear down the corridor. The ticking clock felt too loud. Across the room, a TV murmured daytime news. He barely heard it. Then he noticed the name on the wall mounted. Board patient history scrolling quietly as staff updated them. Miller. Ethan's breath caught Miller. His. Eyes moved down instinctively, scanning dates. Notes he didn't fully understand. One line stood out: neonatal specialist, Dr. Michael Miller. Ethan felt the room tilt. Michael Miller. The name hit him like a physical blow. His heart began to pound, loud enough that he was sure someone else could hear it. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years, but it lived somewhere deep in him, buried under anger and grief. Michael Miller was Lily's brother. His brother-in-law, the man who had stood at Lily's bedside. White coat crisp, voice calm, telling Ethan they'd done everything they could. The man who had hugged him at the funeral then slowly disappeared from his life, not out of cruelty, but silence neither of them knew how to break. And now Ethan stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. His mind raced, stitching together pieces that suddenly made horrifying sense. Grace's hesitation whenever doctors were mentioned, the way she avoided last names, the quiet, unspoken distance whenever family came up. The nurse returned. "Mr. Turner?" Ethan shook his head. I'm with Grace." The nurse nodded. "She'd be out soon." When Grace emerged, her face looked tired but relieved. "They say Ava's doing okay," she said softly. "For now." Ethan stared at her, words trapped in his throat. "What is it?" Grace asked, alarm creeping into her voice. He swallowed. "Grace, is Ava's father Michael Miller?" The color drained from her face. Silence stretched thick, unbearable. "How do you know that name?" She whispered. Ethan's voice was barely steady. "Michael was my wife's brother." Grace staggered back like he'd struck her. "You're your wife?" "Lily," he said. Grace's eyes filled instantly. She pressed a hand to her mouth. Oh, God. The truth unraveled fast after that, too fast to soften the blow. Grace had met Michael during a vulnerable time. A brief connection. Promises that didn't survive reality. When she found out she was pregnant, Michael panicked. Work, reputation, complications. He'd asked for space, then distance became disappearance. Grace hadn't known about Lily until much later. By then, Lily was already gone. "I didn't know," Grace sobbed. "I swear to you, Ethan, I didn't know." Ethan believed her. That didn't make it hurt less. Years of grief collided in one hospital hallway. Lily's absence. Michael's silence. Ava's fragile life standing between them like a living consequence of choices made in fear. I never wanted anything from him. Grace said through tears. "I just wanted my daughter to be okay." Ethan closed his eyes, pain and understanding tearing through him at once. Ava wasn't just a stranger's child. She was Lily's niece. Family. If that realization hit you in the chest the way it did Ethan, leave it in the comments. Some truths arrive quietly, but they carry the weight of a lifetime. Neither of them spoke as they left the hospital. The sky had cleared, sunlight harsh and unforgiving. In the parking lot, Grace finally stopped. "I understand if you want to walk away," she said. "This is too much." "I won't blame you." Ethan looked at Ava Small, breathing, alive. "I won't," he said. But everything just changed. Grace nodded, tears slipping down again. "I know." What neither of them said out loud was the hardest truth of all. Michael would have to be faced. The past could no longer stay buried. And forgiveness, if it was even possible, would demand more courage than either of them felt ready to give. The drive back from the hospital was silent. Not the comfortable kind. This was heavy, fragile, filled with words that didn't yet know how to exist. Ava slept in the back seat, unaware that her tiny life had just redrawn the boundaries of two broken adults. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. Every stoplight felt like a pause for breathing he didn't want to take. Grace stared out the window, wiping her cheeks again and again. Like the tears were an inconvenience she was tired of apologizing for. When they reached Grace's apartment, neither of them moved. "I should go," Grace finally said. Ethan nodded. "Yeah." She hesitated, hand on the door handle. "I never meant to reopen wounds," she whispered. "If I had known, I know," Ethan cut in gently. "This isn't on you." She looked at him then, really looked, searching for resentment, blame, anything that would make sense of the pain. She found none, only exhaustion. That night, Ethan sat alone in his living room long after Liam had gone to bed. Lily's photo still sat on the shelf, her smile frozen in time, soft and forgiving in a way that felt cruel now. "Did you know?" he asked the photo quietly. "Did you see this coming?" The silence didn't answer. Michael's name echoed in his head like a bruise being pressed again and again. He remembered the arguments, the way Michael had insisted on emotional distance during Lily's illness, saying doctors couldn't afford attachments. Ethan had called him cold. Michael had called it survival. Then Lily died, and Michael vanished. 2 days later, Ethan's phone rang, unknown number. He almost ignored it. Almost, "Hello?" "Ethan," came a familiar voice, older now, rougher. "It's Michael." The room seemed to shrink. "I heard Ava had another appointment," Michael continued carefully. I wanted to check if she was okay." Ethan's laugh came out sharp and bitter. "You don't get to call like nothing happened." "I know," Michael said quickly. "I know I don't deserve that. But Grace told me everything. About you. About Lily." Ethan closed his eyes. "I didn't know how to face you," Michael admitted. "After Lily, after everything I failed to do." "You failed to show up," Ethan said, voice low. "For your child. For your sister. For all of us." Silence crackled between them. "I want to meet," Michael said finally. "If you'll let me." Ethan thought of Grace's fear, Ava's fragile breathing. "Liam asleep in the next room, trusting the world to stay kind. Tomorrow," Ethan said. "But don't expect forgiveness." The cafe they chose was neutral ground, too public for shouting, too quiet for escape. Michael looked thinner, hair streaked with gray that hadn't been there before. His hands shook slightly as he held his coffee. "I was scared," Michael said without preamble. "Scared of losing my career. Scared of being responsible for another life when I couldn't save Lily." Ethan's jaw tightened. "So you ran?" "Yes," Michael said. "And I regret it every day." Grace arrived late, Ava in her arms. She froze when she saw Michael. His face crumpled instantly. "I never stopped thinking about you," he said softly. "That doesn't help," Grace replied, voice steady but hollow. Michael looked at Ava, tears filling his eyes. "She's beautiful." "She needed you," Grace said. "I needed you." Ethan watched them, heart splitting in directions he didn't know it could go. Anger surged, but so did something else, understanding. Didn't excuse abandonment, but it explained the cracks. Where fear slipped in, Michael turned to. "Ethan, I know I can never make up for what I did, but I want to be there now. For Ava, for Grace, in whatever way you'll allow." Ethan stood abruptly, chair scraping back. His chest felt like it was on fire. "Do you have any idea?" he said quietly. "How many nights I watched Lily fade while you stayed away? Do you know what it's like to forgive someone who wasn't there when everything fell apart?" Michael bowed his head. "No, but I'm asking you to teach me." The cafe felt too small for the moment that followed. Ethan stepped outside, cold air hitting his face. He paced, hands trembling not with rage alone, but with the weight of choice. Grace joined him a moment later. "You don't owe him anything," she said softly. "I'll understand whatever you decide." Ethan looked through the window at Michael, broken, waiting. "Be honest with yourself right now. If someone hurt you this deeply, could you forgive them? Type forgive if you think you could, or never if that wound would be too deep to reopen." Ethan exhaled slowly. "I don't know how to forgive him," he said. "But I know what happens when we don't try." He turned back toward the cafe, not because the pain was gone, but because love, real love, sometimes asks us to walk straight into the place that hurts the most. Of the conversation inside the cafe never fully recovered its balance after Ethan returned. Words were spoken, explanations offered, but something deeper was happening beneath the surface, something quieter and far more difficult. They agreed on small steps, Michael would start by attending Ava's medical appointments. No grand gestures. No forcing himself into Grace's life. Just presence, consistency, accountability. Grace listened with her arms wrapped around Ava, her face unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but firm. "I'm not promising forgiveness," she said. "I'm promising honesty. If you disappear again, we're done." Michael nodded without hesitation. "I understand." Ethan watched it all like someone observing a delicate operation. One wrong move and everything could bleed out. Still, as painful as it was, he couldn't deny the strange sense of rightness settling in. Ava deserved more than broken adults circling their own wounds. That night, Ethan told Liam the truth in careful, age-softened pieces. "Ava is family," he said. Sitting on the edge of Liam's bed, Liam's eyes widened. "Like cousin family?" Ethan smiled sadly. "Yeah, like that." Liam thought for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, can I share my toys with her?" Something in Ethan's chest cracked open. The weeks that followed were hard but different. Michael showed up. Every time. Awkward at first, overly careful but present. Grace watched him closely, never relaxing, never fully pushing him away either. Ethan kept his distance when needed, stepped in when asked. He learned that forgiveness wasn't a single decision. It was dozens of small ones made daily, each one costing something. One evening, after a long appointment where Ava's test results finally showed improvement, they sat together outside the hospital. The sun dipped low, casting everything in gold. "She's getting stronger," Grace said quietly. Michael exhaled shakily. "I know I don't deserve to feel relieved, but I do." Grace didn't respond. She didn't need to. Ethan leaned back on the bench, staring at the sky. Lily would have loved this child, he thought. The idea hurt, but it also healed something he hadn't realized was still bleeding. Life didn't magically fix itself. There were setbacks, arguments, nights Grace cried alone after putting Ava to sleep. Days Ethan felt anger flare without warning. Moments Michael hated himself all over again, but there were good moments. Liam pushing Ava's stroller proudly through the park. Grace laughing, really laughing for the first time in months. Michael reading parenting books like his life depended on it. One afternoon, while watching the kids nap in the living room, Grace spoke softly. "I don't know what the future looks like." Ethan nodded. "Me neither." But for the first time, she said, "I don't feel like I'm drowning." That mattered. If you believe that love still wins, even when it's messy. Slow and imperfect comment, amen. Let this space fill with hope. Someone scrolling right now might need to see it more than you realize. Ethan didn't know what role he would play long term. He only knew that showing up again and again was changing all of them. Redemption wasn't loud. It didn't erase the past. It simply chose to build something better on top of it. And as winter gave way to early spring, as Ava's laughter began to replace the constant worry, Ethan felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Not closure, but peace, quiet, fragile and real. Still, one final truth remained unspoken. One moral waiting to be faced. And it would arrive gently, asking them all to decide what kind of people they wanted to be from here on out. Spring arrived quietly, almost cautiously, like it wasn't sure it was welcome yet. Trees outside Ethan's apartment began to bud, thin green leaves pushing through branches that had looked dead only weeks ago. The air felt lighter. Not happy, just lighter. On a Saturday morning, the four of them stood in a small park near Grace's building. Liam chased pigeons with dramatic seriousness. Ava sat in a blanket on the grass, clapping at nothing and everything all at once. Grace watched her closely, still unable to fully trust the calm. "She's been sleeping better," Grace said. "More to herself than anyone else." Michael nodded. The specialist thinks the new treatment is working. Ethan stayed quiet, hands in his pockets, observing the way Grace didn't step away when Michael knelt beside Ava, how she corrected him gently when he held the bottle wrong, how Michael accepted it without pride, without defense. Progress looked like that small, almost invisible to anyone not paying attention. Later that afternoon, while Grace put Ava down for a nap, Michael lingered by the window. "I'm moving closer," he said to Ethan. "I found a place 10 minutes away. I won't push, but I don't want distance to be an excuse ever again." Ethan studied him. The man in front of him wasn't the confident doctor he remembered. He was humbler now, slower, changed. "That's on you to prove," Ethan said. "I know." That evening, after everyone left, Ethan sat alone again, but the silence no longer felt empty. He picked up Lily's photo from the shelf, holding it carefully. "She would have loved Ava," he said softly. "She would have forgiven you faster than I ever could." The words surprised him. They were true and painful and freeing all at once. Days later, Grace called him unexpectedly. "Ava's daycare spot just opened," she said, breathless. "I can finally take on more hours." "That's great," Ethan said, smiling. "I couldn't have done this without you," she added quietly. Ethan leaned against the wall, eyes closing. "You did more than you think?" Grace paused. "So did you." The next few weeks passed with a fragile sense of normal. Ethan and Grace no longer met out of crisis, but out of routine. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners into long conversations once the kids were asleep. One night, sitting on the balcony, Grace spoke what they'd both been avoiding. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of you, of happiness. Every time things feel good, I'm waiting for it to fall apart." Ethan nodded. "I waited for years after Lily died. I thought letting myself feel anything again would betray her." Grace looked at him. And now, he said slowly, "I think love doesn't replace love. It expands." She didn't answer right away. She just reached for his hand, hesitant, unsure. Ethan didn't pull away. Inside, Ava stirred in her sleep. Life continued, unaware of the quiet courage it took just to sit in moments like this. Not everything healed. Michael still carried guilt like a shadow. Grace still flinched at unexpected calls. Ethan still woke some nights thinking he heard Lily's voice, but something fundamental had changed. Pain no longer owned the future. One afternoon, as Ethan helped Liam with homework at the kitchen table, Liam looked up suddenly. "Dad, yeah, are we a weird family now?" Ethan smiled gently. "Maybe." Liam considered this. "I like it." Ethan laughed soft, real. Later that night, as Ethan stood at the window watching city lights blink on one by one, he realized something that felt almost sacred. That dinner, the one that started. Everything was never about food. It was about noticing. About choosing to see someone when it would have been easier to look away. And now, standing at the edge of something new, Ethan felt the quiet weight of meaning settle over everything that had happened so far. As if the story itself was leaning toward its final truth, the anniversary came quietly. No reminders. No calendar alerts. Just a date Ethan felt in his bones the moment he woke up. Lily had been gone 6 years. Long enough that people stopped asking how he was doing. Long enough that grief learned how to whisper instead of scream. Ethan stood in the kitchen, coffee growing cold in his hands. Outside, the city moved like it always did, unaware, indifferent, alive. Liam patted in, hair messy, eyes half closed. "Dad," Ethan turned. "Yeah, buddy. Are you sad today?" Liam asked, as if asking about the weather. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "A little." Liam thought for a moment, then walked over and hugged him tight, wordless. "It's okay," he said. "We can still have a good day." Ethan closed his eyes, Later that afternoon, Grace came by with Ava. No announcements. No explanations. She seemed to know. They sat together on the couch. Ava babbled softly, gripping Ethan's finger with surprising strength. She does that when she feels safe, Grace said quietly. Ethan swallowed. Michael arrived later, standing awkwardly in the doorway. He held a small potted plant white lily. I didn't know if this was okay, he said carefully. Ethan looked at the flowers. Lily's favorite dot, he nodded once. It's okay. They went together to the small park nearby. Nothing dramatic. Just a bench, trees swaying gently, the sound of distant traffic. Ethan placed the lily near the base of a tree, soil still clinging to their roots. I used to think, Ethan said slowly, that honoring Lily meant staying exactly where I was when she left. Like moving forward would erase her. Grace listened silently, but now, he continued, I think honor looks different. I think it looks like kindness that keeps going. Michael wiped his eyes, saying nothing. Ava squealed suddenly, reaching toward the flowers. Grace laughed through tears. Ethan smiled. In that moment. Everything aligned, not perfectly, not painlessly, but honestly. Later that evening, after goodbyes were said and the apartment grew quiet again, Ethan sat alone once more. But this time, the silence didn't ache. He thought back to that restaurant. The warm lights. The woman with the sleeping baby. The choice that took less than a minute but changed everything. He realized something then. Kindness doesn't announce itself. It doesn't. Ask if the timing is right or if the story will end. Well, it simply shows up. Before this story ends. If it moved you in any way, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for a channel, not for a video, but for the people who carry pain silently and still choose to be gentle. One click can be your way of saying, I saw you. I felt this. Ethan stood and walked into Liam's room, watching his son sleep. Then he checked on Ava, curled safely in her crib at Grace's place next door. Family now. In the truest sense of the word, life would still be hard. There would be hospital visits, doubts, old, grief resurfacing when least expected. There would also be dinners, laughter, hands reaching out instead of pulling away. And if there was a lesson in all of this soft, human, and real, it was this. You never know how far one small act will travel, one moment of noticing. One decision to help. One choice to stay kind when the world gives you every reason not to. Sometimes. That's all it takes to change not just a life, but many. And somewhere tonight, someone else is sitting in a quiet restaurant, hoping to be seen. Maybe this time, they will be.